Welcome to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, Yarby Laws, and this is.
Christopher Wells.
First off, we want to wish everyone like a happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day and hope everyone's having a really good holiday. Secondly, we want to apologize. The last episode didn't get completely uploaded due to some technical difficulties we had on our side of things. But at the end of the last episode, we were basically going to announce that this week's episode or today's episode is going to cover the all-star voting polls currently, and that we're going to pick our own all-stars, starters and reserves. That is so.
All right, so I guess let's start off getting into it. So
Yeah.
we'll start off with the West, since the leading vote getter LeBron's in the Western Conference. We'll start off with the Western Conference with the guards. So for my guards, for my first one, I had Luka Doncic, and then I had Stephen Curry. So for Luka, I mean, I picked him because he's having a great individual season.
Yeah.
I mean, he's leading the league in scoring as of this recording, averaging like 34, 9, and 9. I mean, they're I think at this point, fifth in the Western Conference. Of course, it goes back and forth since the West has been really competitive. But I felt that one was pretty much a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And then for Steph, it was really a tough choice between him and Ja Morant. But I just wanted to go with Steph just because, he's on the team that's the defending champion. Before he got hurt, he was having a really good season, one of his best seasons in his career. Again, averaging like 36 and 6, great shooting. So for me, those were the guards that I chose for the Western Conference.
Dope. Funny thing is, I have the exact same one. So, I have Luka and Steph. And Luka was pretty much a no-brainer because he's having a career year. It's historic almost. He's been unstoppable, and like I said, I think he could potentially take the Mavericks to the finals if he keeps up this kind of play. And then Steph was my second one. Like I said, uh, you know, again, undisputed greatness. He looks really good. Coming off the injury, that's kind of what we expect. Like him to kick right back into gear. So, and then yeah, I also had it was a close pick between Ja and Steph, but just from a numbers standpoint, I think Steph has been playing better this season. But Ja looks really good, so not taken away from Ja at all.
Yeah. And then, so moving on to the front court, I had LeBron, Anthony Davis, and I had Nikola Jokic.
Okay.
So LeBron averaging 38 and 7, age 38, year 20. I know the Lakers haven't been very good, but
Yeah.
I mean, either way, the Warriors haven't really been that great either. So I just chose him just because, again, he's having a great season, even at this stage in his career. AD was kind of a similar thing to Steph, where, again, he was putting up great numbers before he got hurt, 27 points, 12 rebounds, 2 blocks a game.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I mean, like, that's kind of a running theme with a number of the guys that we picked here where there've been a lot of injuries. So, I mean, for me, the injuries part doesn't really matter to me a whole lot with these guys. And then, of course, you got to have Jokic in there. I mean, his
Yeah.
team is tied, I think, with Memphis for the number one seed in the Western Conference, basically almost averaging a triple double as a center, like 27, 11, 9.5. I mean, his team's been great. He's been great. I mean, that one is pretty much undisputed there. So those are my picks for the Western front court and the West starters.
Yeah. All right. So for my front court, I have LeBron, Zion, and Jokic. So the reason I picked Zion over AD, I know this is gonna sound weird, but because they both been hurt, but I really think Zion's impact on the court this season has been a lot better than AD's when they're both healthy. And, both of them haven't really been healthy, which is the unfortunate part. But I just think Zion is going to be better than AD down the line. And with AD, I feel like he's kind of lost himself. Like he doesn't, I mean, before he got hurt, he was kind of going to the rack more, shooting more mid range and less threes. But, in the past couple of years, he's kind of been trying to shoot threes and create. And it's like, that's not necessarily the strongest feat of his game, but he definitely has it. But I feel like he strayed away from that a little bit. But, Zion is just an unstoppable force. That's the thing. And when he's healthy, he knows his game. He sticks to it. He's not going to try and jack threes or, he's just going to go straight to the rim.
Yes.
And I just feel like that's more impactful than what AD does. just from the scoring standpoint. But defensively, I think AD probably better than Zion. Rebounds too, but he just plays physical basketball. So I'm taking Zion over AD on that one.
Yeah, I think if you weren't going to pick AD, I think that's the guy to pick.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Hopefully I don't get hate for that one, but we'll see.
All right, so moving on to the East for the guards. So for my first one, I had Kyrie Irving, and then I had Donovan Mitchell. So I know Kyrie's been kind of like a controversial figure for a good chunk of this season and the last couple years in general, but I mean, putting up 26, 5, and 5,
Mhm.
great efficiency. His 3-point percentage is a little bit down around 36, but still, either way, I mean, like he's been putting up great numbers, and Brooklyn's been really good. I mean,
Yeah.
they're one of the top 3 seeds in the Eastern Conference, and he's a big reason why. Um, and so moving on from that, then we got Donovan Mitchell, obviously 29 and 5, playing for Cleveland, putting up basically career numbers for a really good team. I think these are the two guards that I would choose for my backcourt in the Eastern Conference.
All right, time for my starters. So for my guards, I have Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. The reason I took Darius Garland over Kyrie is because I feel like he's had a overall more well-rounded season. Uh, he's averaging like 21 on 45% field goal percentage, and 7 assists. I feel like the assists are kind of overlooked because I think Kyrie's averaging what, 4?
About 5.
Yeah, 4 or
Yeah, a little
5.
under 5.
And it's like I'd prefer a point guard that is more, I'm not going to say well-rounded, but can distribute it a little bit more. That's just my personal preference. Kyrie's undisputed, like one of the best ball handlers all time. Flashy, he can score, he can shoot from anywhere. And at the rim, he's unstoppable too for a guy that doesn't dunk. But yeah, I'm taking Garland because I really like the leap that he's taken.
Yeah,
And
really
yeah, he's their franchise point guard. And we know what we have with Kyrie, but I feel like Darius Garland's just getting started. So I'd like to see him starting in the All-Star game this year. But we'll see.
Yeah. I think, yeah, and it's pretty cool with Garland that he's able to put up those assist numbers, even playing alongside Donovan Mitchell, who's obviously
Yeah,
going to get a fair amount of offense too. So I think you definitely got to give him credit for that. I think that's a really good
exactly.
pick um, for a guard if it wasn't Kyrie.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to the front court in the Eastern Conference. This one was another really, really difficult one. I had a really hard time choosing between 4 different guys, but in the end, you have to pick 3. So my first one, I had Kevin Durant. I think that one's pretty obvious, averaging 37 and 5,
Mm-hmm.
56% from the field, 38 from 3, again on second best team in the Eastern Conference. I think that one's pretty good. He's having one of his best seasons as a pro. Even this late into his career, even after all the injuries, he's been one of the best players in the league. So I think
Yeah.
he's definitely deserving of one of those starting spots. And then for the next one, I had Giannis averaging 31 and 12. I mean, his team's also been really great. He's awesome. Um, I mean, I think that one's kind of a pretty obvious pick as well. And then for this third one, it was a really tough choice between Tatum and Embiid, but for this one, I had to go with Tatum. I think just because of the fact that Boston has the #1 record, I felt like it'd be really hard to leave out, somebody out of the starting 5 if your team has the best record. So I went with
Yeah.
him, 31, 8, and 4. I know his numbers may not look quite as impressive as Embiid's, but also you have to factor in Tatum's one of the best defensive players too. And I mean, I just think his numbers have been really impactful for that team.
Yeah. So for my front court, I went with Tatum, KD, and Giannis. Exact same. Um, you hit on all the points, but to kind of go over it, I mean, Tatum, was in the front running for the MVP at one point. I'm not sure if that still stands, but I feel like it could for some people. But his numbers have been really good. Just not as, I don't, I guess beefed up is the term. Not as beefed up as Embiid's. But Embiid gets a lot of his points from the free throw line. I've mentioned that before in this podcast, and I already saw him live. And it's like you don't realize it until you're actually looking at him for every minute of the game. And it's like he's at the line again. So I'm not saying like that that's a bad thing or you know I don't know, man. I just have to pick Tatum over
Yeah.
Embiid. I'm
Yeah.
on the
Like
same boat as you.
Yeah, I just felt like it was really difficult to leave out somebody
Yeah,
when your team has the number one record, not even just in the East, but also just in the NBA. I just
yeah,
felt like that'd be kind of unfair to leave somebody out of that.
yeah. And then, KD, like you said, he's averaging 30. So, and, I think the thing that people don't talk about enough is that he came back from the Achilles, bro.
Yeah,
Like, you don't hear about people really successfully coming back from Achilles that often. Kobe tore his Achilles, and I think in 2016, he was only averaging like 16.9.
yeah, he wasn't the same after he tore his Achilles, and
Exactly.
there's only
So,
been a handful of guys who've been able to come back from that and are just as good.
exactly. And like Durant's been putting up, you know, really, really good numbers. So, he's got to go into my front court. And then Giannis, he's freak of nature. He's unstoppable. Um, Personally, I think Giannis is better than Embiid. So I'm putting Giannis over Embiid as well. I just don't think that Embiid is better than Tatum, KD, and Giannis.
Yeah, yeah,
Personally,
Giannis. Yeah, Giannis was kind of my like de facto front court guy where I'm not leaving him
yeah.
out. And then on to the reserves for the Western Conference. So this isn't really in any particular order. These are just the names that I chose. So I had Ja Morant. Obviously, like I said, similar to Jokic, they're right at the top of the Western Conference. He's
Mhm.
putting up 27, 6, and 8. I mean, again, for one of the top teams in the NBA, I mean, he's been playing great basketballs
For
as
sure.
their lead guard.
Yeah.
The next one, again, injuries didn't really play too much of a factor for me since there've been so many injuries. But Devin Booker, I know Phoenix hasn't really been that great this season, but I think before he got hurt, they were much better than that. I mean, he was averaging again 27 and 5, one of his best seasons,
Hmm.
really efficient. And then when you consider all the drama surrounding Phoenix, all the things that happened to them going into the season, like with the owner, with DeAndre Ayton and
Yeah.
Jay Crowder. I mean, you kind of have to give him props for putting up those numbers. Uh, Zion Williamson, that was another one I had. Like I said, I chose AD as the starter, but
Yeah.
Zion, he's been playing great basketball too. Again, he's been hurt as of late, but 26, 7, and 5, shooting almost 60% from the field. Doesn't really take a lot of threes, but like you said, doesn't really need to because I mean he can pretty much get whatever he wants around the rim. Um, this next one, Demontis Sabonis, 19, 12 and a half, and 7. It was really kind of a hard choice between him and De'Aaron Fox
Yeah.
for me,
For
but
sure.
I kind of wanted to just have him in because I also didn't want like but so many guards in there. And then just at the same time, I feel like some of these guys that we leave out will be in there as like injury replacements.
Yeah.
Um, so I chose Sabonis. I mean, Sacramento's been, I mean, I thought going into the season they'd be a solid team, but more like a play-in team. But they've been better than that. So
Hmm.
we'll see if they can keep it up. But I definitely think that they're deserving of having at least one All-Star. So I chose Sabonis.
Okay.
This next one, I think this one is pretty obvious. Shea Gilgis Alexander for Oklahoma City. 31, 5, and 6. They've been, I think, a lot better than what people were expecting, especially after, their second pick of the draft, Chet Holmgren, went down for the
Yeah.
season. I mean, Shea's basically been carrying them. That he's been playing great. I mean, obviously record wise, it doesn't look amazing, but it's still a lot better than what you would have expected. Because I think a lot of people would have expected, especially once Chet went down, that they were gonna tank and be like one of the 5 worst teams. But they've been much better than that.
Yeah.
They're within striking distance for that play-in spot. Um, then for the next one, Lauri Markkinen for the Utah Jazz, 25 and 9, kind of similar to Shea, where it's just another guy that's been putting up really good numbers for a team that's been a lot better than what you would have expected. And I think he's pretty deserving of an All Star nod as a reserve.
Yeah.
And then finally, Damian Lillard, which is kind of funny because in the past he was usually like talked about a lot more. I know Portland hasn't been that great this year, but he's had a pretty good individual bounce back year. He's been a little bit healthier as of late, putting up 28 and a half and 7. So
It's
those are
crazy.
mine.
So for my West reserves, I'm starting off with Ja. He's been really good. And like I said, he really could have been a starter if it wasn't for Curry putting up these numbers or Luca. Um, Memphis, they're tied for first in the West, so he definitely deserves to be in the game no matter what. Then I have De'Aaron Fox. I like to show love to the smaller market teams, and I think, like you said earlier, one of the two of those star players really deserve to be in it. Between Sabonis and Fox, I'm going Fox. Then I have SGA, undisputed. He's really good, taking the next leap. He's going to be a superstar. Probably really already is, if you, depending on your definition. But yeah, he's going to be a force to reckon with. So he's definitely in the game for me. Dame, I got to show love to Dame because when you don't win, you're kind of not talked about as much. So I feel like that's why he's not, you know, being talked about in the media too much. I know he was a couple of years ago and last season, but they got to get him some real help over there if he wants to be, you know, in the rotation of the media. They got to start winning. And then I have Kawhi for one of my reserves,
Mhm. Interesting.
and I was really torn between Kawhi and Sabonis because they're both really good, but Sabonis hasn't missed that much time. Like Kawhi missed a lot of time.
Yeah, Sabonis is basically playing, I think, through a hand or wrist injury right now.
Exactly. And Kawhi's on his load management stuff, and I think he was coming off an injury at the beginning of the season anyway.
Yeah,
But I got to put Kawhi in there because when he's on the court, he does what he does. He's really good defensively, insane mid range, all the stuff. Intangibles. It's insane. And then I have 80. And I'm not putting him here for pity, but like I said, injuries. If he wasn't injured, he probably would be my starter over Zion. But I got to take injuries into account, so he's in my reserves as well. And then for my final one, I have Lauri Markkinen, and I feel like he's really developed as a solo player. The Jazz, they started off kind of hot, but they've been on the decline a little bit. But I really enjoy watching Markkinen because I remember in Chicago he was okay, but he's definitely looked a lot better. And in Cleveland he looked okay too, but he really looks like he's molding his game into something else. It kind of reminds me of Porzingis a little bit, but
yeah,
we'll see.
he looks like he's found a home there.
Yeah, I think it's the right system. So props to him. So he's in my reserves too.
All right. Well, wrapping it on up, I guess, with the East reserves. So for me, I had Jalen Brown, again, in no particular order, but Jalen Brown, 27-7, again, playing, great basketball for the best team in the league. They definitely deserve to have two All Stars, both of
Mm-hmm.
those guys. So he's one of my choices. Joel Embiid, again, it was a really tough toss up between him and Tatum, but again, I just factored in the Celtics have been better than Philly, and I mean, that was kind of what went into my final decision. I mean, he's still
Yeah.
been playing great, averaging 33 and 10, one of the top scorers in the league. I think second place as of this recording.
Mm-hmm.
Darius Garland, I chose him as one of my reserves. I just personally thought, even though Garland's had a good season, I think Kyrie's season has also been really good, and Brooklyn's been a little bit better than Cleveland.
Yeah.
I mean, they started off really rough, but they've really picked it up. Cleveland's definitely been more consistent, but overall, I guess you could factor in the last couple of months, Brooklyn's been, one of the top teams. But yeah, Garland's one of my reserves. Jalen Brunson for the Knicks,
Mm.
averaging about 22-6. I mean, he's been really good. It was kind of hard to choose between him and Randall, but again, I feel like Brunson's been a little bit more consistent. Randall's been playing much better as of late, but he kind of struggled early on in the season.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a pretty cool story for him to go to New York and play really good basketball. And that team has been pretty solid.
For sure.
And then, of course, I think this is kind of one of the ones that I don't think anybody would have expected going into the season. Tyrese Halliburton, I chose him. Again, he's going to be out for the next couple of weeks, but before he got hurt, I mean, he was basically averaging 20 points, 10 assists. I mean, you don't really see as many guys averaging like double-digit assists anymore. We got some guys that are close, but he does feel like a pure point guard. I mean, he
Mm-hmm.
can shoot the lights out. I know his shot is kind of unorthodox, but
Yeah.
Indiana's another one of those teams, kind of like a Utah or OKC, that have been a lot better than expected. So I went with him. The last two, I just went with Jimmy Butler. I mean, it just kind of feels like a normal like go-to pick. I know
Okay.
Miami hasn't been that great this season. They've been better as of late, but again, it was kind of a toss-up between him and Bam. But again, I didn't want both of them to be all stars, so I kind of just went with Jimmy Butler on here. And then last but not least, I chose Trae Young. I know Atlanta's been in the news a lot recently, because they haven't been that great and they've had some stuff going on Just like with the coach not having a
Yeah.
great time there, not getting along with Trey. Some other stuff in regards to the owner, kind of like, you know, uh, putting his implant on the organization more and not really in a good way. But again, Trey Young, he's been having a decent season, 28 and 10. The shooting's way down from what you feel like it should be, but again, I think he's still been worthy of being an all-star. And like I said, these could obviously change depending on whether or not guys are actually available to play. Some guys will be put in as reserves, so they'll
Right.
end up being more than what we have, but those are my picks for the East reserves.
Fire. All right. So my reserves are Joel Embiid. I have to put him there. He's the best outside of my starters. I feel like,
For sure.
you know, um, it goes pretty much without saying. I kind of already touched on him, so I won't delve into that too much. Um, then I have Jalen Brown. Boston is just insane this year, and having two All Stars for them, I think, just goes to show that they're that good. And if they don't make it to the finals or win the finals or whatever, I feel like that's an accomplishment in itself to have two All Stars in the game. And then I have DeRozan. I know people are probably going to hate on that because everybody says his game is dying, but he's just so solid and smooth. The mid range is insane, and he's clutch. People don't talk about that. He's clutch, so he hits a lot of game winners. And I can speak from experience because he's hit some against the Wizards. But yeah, he's really good. Next one I have is Harden, and the reason I put him there is because he's averaging 11 assists alongside 20 points. So, and like you were saying earlier with Halliburton, like you don't see people really average a double double with assists too often anymore. So, and I mean, like he's taken a step back in terms of his scoring over the past few years. And I think it just goes to show you how versatile his game is because he didn't always used to be a playmaker. Like, but the fact that he's averaging 11 assists is crazy. So I'm putting him there. And then I have Kyrie. That goes without saying, too. Probably arguably the best ball handler of all time. He's too flashy to not be in the game. And his numbers are really good. But like I said, I'd prefer a well rounded point guard a little bit more than just a scorer. So that's why Garland's starting over him. But Kyrie's definitely in the game for me too. Then I have Bam. You know, I feel like he's overlooked because Miami's not winning. A couple of years ago, he was talked about a lot. Like they're like he's going to be like one of the next top marquee centers in the East. Um, but that hype has died down because they're performing mediocre, in my opinion. A far cry from the team that we saw in the finals.
Yeah, they were the number one seed last year. I mean,
Exactly. So they've fallen off a little bit. And like I said, when you're not winning, you're not talked about. So I'm showing love to the guys that aren't talked about for my reserves and really my starters too. But yeah, Bam, 100% is in. And then my final one is Trey. Like you said, with all the drama, I really don't want to regurgitate everything you said, but I'm pretty sure he's putting up like what, around 27,
yeah.
something like that. So he looks really good, despite all the things going on off the court with Atlanta. He's playing at all-star level, undisputed. So that's my list.
All right. Well, I guess to summarize, our picks. So for me, I had for the guards in the West, Luka and Steph. Front court, LeBron, AD, Jokic.
Mhm.
For my reserves, Ja, Booker, Zion, Sabonis, Shea, Markkanen, and Lillard. And then in the East for the guards, Kyrie and Donovan Mitchell. Front court, Durant, Giannis, Tatum. And then reserves, Brown, Embiid, Garland, Brunson, Halliburton, Butler, and Trey Young.
Yeah. Um, to recap my list, my starters for the West were Steph and Luka. For the front court, it was LeBron, Zion, Jokic. For my reserves, it was Ja, De'Aaron Fox, SGA, Dame, Kawhi, AD, and Markkanen. My starters in the East, it was Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell. Front court, Tatum, KD, Giannis. And reserves, Embiid, Jalen Brown, DeRozan, Harden, Kyrie, Bam, and Trey. But let us know in the comment section, like what your all-star list would be. Maybe not all the reserves if that's too much, but at least just the starters for each conference.
All right. So moving on, we're going to go into some rumors now. So I
Yeah.
know there's been some stuff going on with D'Angelo Russell.
Yeah. So basically, he's still in trade talks and things are kind of heating up, no pun intended. But he's recently quoted stating, "You either take advantage of me and my ability or F up the opportunity with me." That's a pretty bold quote coming from him, especially since I'm not going to say he's had a down year. Well, yeah, it's been a down year because, especially coming off that All Star season he had a few years back, it's pretty rough to see. But uh, yeah, in a previous episode, I did talk about a potential Heat Wolves trade involving Russell and Lowry, but Jake Fisher of Yahoo Sports basically said the Heat are registering interest in D'Lo, but it's unlikely that it's a direct deal involving Lowry. Personally, I think that Lowry is worse than D'Lo from a numbers standpoint, so I understand like not dealing for both for each other or whatever, but I think that simply the Wolves are just looking to move on from D'Lo. Simply as that, like because I just feel like he doesn't really add anything to Minnesota. I feel like he needs to be. He's one of those players where I feel like he's going to succeed on a really bad team with nobody around him. You
Yeah.
know, I feel like that's the situation that he's in his career. Nothing wrong with that, but I just don't see him succeeding when he's not the only guy, shooting the ball.
Mhm. Yeah. I think for Minnesota, I mean, like it just does kind of feel like they really messed up with that Gobert trade. I mean,
Yeah.
I know they've been, playing a little bit better as of late, but I mean, nobody's really going to take them seriously as a team that's going to go that far. So they may have kind of just put themselves in a hole where they kind of almost have to like build around it since
Mm-hmm.
that's all they can really do at this point since they've gave up so much to try to make it work and trading D'Lo may be like one of the only options that you might have. Um, I mean, the Lowry thing, I don't know. He just kind of feels like at this point he might just be like, I don't want to use the term wash, but it just kind of feels like he might be at a point in his career where I don't think he's quite as effective. I don't think
Yeah.
he's good, on either end of the floor anymore. Obviously, he's never that athletic, but now that he's older, he's a lot slower. And I don't know. I don't know how much he would really help Minnesota at that point. It almost kind of feels like if you're Minnesota, almost like a sell low trade. But I guess at the same time, again, I don't know how much you're really going to get back for D'Lo.
Yeah. And like you said with Lowry, I don't think he's washed. I think it's just age. And he's been an all-star throughout his career, and it's just that time where you start seeing regression. And I really think that the Heat should consider trading somebody to get D'Lo.
Yeah.
Just maybe for this season or whatever. Just add something. And Minnesota needs a change of scenery, regardless.
Yeah.
And clearly it sounds like D'Lo wants out. If he's gonna take to the media and say that quote, you either take advantage of me and my ability or F up the opportunity with me. That's insane to me.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It just feels kind of odd. I just don't necessarily know, you know, where he would fit on a good team because when you think about it, most of the good teams, have a point guard that they're probably comfortable with. I guess if you're Miami, you're probably not super comfortable with Lowry, but we'll kind of see where that goes because again, I think he's on an expiring contract. We
Mm-hmm.
got less than a month until the trade deadline, so he could be a guy that could just be moved, but we'll kind of have to see because again, Minnesota, in fairness, has been playing better as of late, even with Towns out and Gobert
Yeah,
kind of being in and out with injury. So we'll just have to see.
for sure. Um,
All right. So moving on to the next rumor, according to Mark Stein, John Collins' team, I guess, has been given an opportunity to kind of scour the trade market on their own. I haven't really heard something worded like that before, but apparently
yeah.
that is the thing. Obviously we kind of mentioned in the last podcast, we do like John Collins and I don't know. It feels like his value right now is kind of at all time low. It doesn't really feel like Atlanta's really using him a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, personally, if I'm Atlanta, I wouldn't really want to trade him because I think at this point you're not going to get back a whole lot for him. But it could
Yeah.
just be time for a change of scenery. Some of the teams that they had mentioned were like the Wizards, the Jazz, Dallas, Brooklyn was also a name that had come up. No real traction anywhere yet, obviously, but it could just be time for a change of scenery for him because I mean, I do like him and I think he can help a team out, but it just feels like it may not be in Atlanta.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, but I've already expressed that I really like to see Trey Young and John Collins on the floor together. Their chemistry looks so good. But, you know, I think, like you said, it might really be time to move on, and he just might need a change of scenery.
Yeah.
And I really think the Mavericks would be a good fit for him. I don't know how they would make that work, but that could be the Mavs' way of getting Luca some help, some much needed help.
Right.
So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to the next one, another Boyan rumor. So the Lakers potentially eyeing Boyan Bogdanovic and Nerlens Noel. This one is kind of a strange one to me. I can understand Boyan. Nerlens. I mean, not that he's necessarily bad, but and I get that, like, if they want another big, you'd like a more defensive minded big, but also, like, I'm curious how this trade would actually even work because I think contractually speaking, if it was just Bogdanovich, you could, even though I don't think if I was Detroit, I would take it unless they gave up, a pick or two,
Hmm.
but it would have to be like Pat Bev and none. But if you add in Nerlens, that doesn't work. So you'd have to throw in either like a number of their really small contract guys, or you'd even have to throw in like a Lonnie Walker.
Yeah.
Maybe if you feel like you can't bring him back and re-sign him, maybe you trade him. But I don't know. This it feels kind of like a really strange deal, and what's kind of been a strange season for them.
Yeah. And like you said, he's been in so many rumors. Like, I think we've covered him 2 times already. And I don't know. I feel like he could go anywhere, to be honest. That's how good he's really been.
Yeah,
So, and I know he's drawing a lot of interest, which is why there's so many rumors, but I don't really understand the whole package that you just explained. Like,
yeah,
that doesn't really make sense to me. And if I was a
yeah,
Laker fan, I'd kind of just brush that aside. I'd be like, nah,
yeah.
it's not worth it.
Yeah, I don't know. It feels like a lot, and at the same time, I just feel like that other teams are going to be able to outbid them for him. I
For
mean, I
sure.
could be wrong. We'll see how much he's going to be valued at. But I mean, he's having a great year. I think he could help any team. So we'll
Yeah.
just have to see where this goes.
Yeah, we'll see.
Speaking of another guy in a similar situation, Jakob Pertl, according to Woj, that's another guy that could potentially be on the trade block. This one, I don't know. If I'm the Spurs, unless you're getting back like maybe, solid picks or something, I mean, you're already bad. So I feel like I'd rather kind of just, unless you don't think you're going to be able to keep him long term, I'd almost rather just kind of like see if I can keep him and see if he can, like, work with whoever you draft
Yeah.
this upcoming offseason rather than just give him away. I mean, of course, it kind of depends on what teams are willing to give up for him. I think there are some teams that could use him, maybe a team like the Warriors if you want another big man, or somebody like that. But
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm just curious as to what they can get back for him because it just feels like, you know, I mean, the DeJounte Murray thing is interesting because you didn't get back any players, but you did get picks. And if Atlanta continues to struggle, those picks could be, solid picks, maybe lottery picks, especially if they miss the playoffs.
Yeah.
But I don't know. This one is kind of just strange. I guess we'll just have to keep, again, going towards the deadline, and see what happens.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I think they should maybe trade for some picks. Because they're already in rebuild mode. So what's really the worst that could happen with you giving up Jakob Pertl for a pick, or two? But we'll see where that goes to.
And then another one, according to NBCS Chicago, Alex Caruso drawing interest from the Knicks and the Warriors. This kind of makes sense. I mean, the Bulls have been struggling this season. They feel like a team that maybe could move some guys. They have been playing better as of late, but again, I'm curious how much they'd be willing to keep all of those guys. And I think he is a guy that can help any team, again, because he's a big guard that can defend. He's athletic, and those teams definitely make a lot of sense. I think the Warriors makes more sense for him than the Knicks, just because I mean, he already contributed to a championship caliber team with the Lakers, so I think he could do the same with the Warriors. The Knicks, obviously, if you want a talent upgrade, but I don't know. I feel like if I'm Caruso, I would prefer going to the Warriors. And I feel like of those teams, I think he would help the Warriors more. I mean, he would make the Knicks better, I guess, but not that much better. I mean, if they get, Caruso to the Knicks, I mean, I don't think they would leapfrog any of the teams that they're currently behind. So I
Yeah.
think the Warriors makes the most sense for that one.
Yeah, I'd like to see him on the Warriors, actually. Like, that would be really cool for him
Yeah,
and
and I
them.
mean, mhm. Yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, and I mean, like that's also like another guy that you can have in the closing lineup. Obviously, they've kind of struggled defensively this season. That's part of why they've kind of been so up and down. So I think that, honestly, that's of the rumors we've heard. I think that one is pretty realistic, makes a lot of sense, and one that I think could really help out.
Yeah, and I did see Steve Kerr. There was a clip I saw on my IG feed, and it was like Steve Kerr talking to Caruso, and he's like, "We'd love to have you, man." So we'll see. That probably means nothing, but
Yeah.
that would be really cool to see Caruso on the Warriors, like you said.
Yeah. And then for our final rumor, Heat and Bucks sign Jay Crowder. Of course, this makes sense. The Heat trying to improve on what they've been this season. Milwaukee obviously eyeing another title run.
Hmm.
I think the Bucks makes more sense. Again, it's just another scenario where I just don't think he makes the Heat better enough. Of course, obviously you want to be better, but I think that if he goes to the Bucks, their ceiling is higher than if he goes to the Heat.
For
I
sure.
mean, the Bucks are already really good, and I mean, if you add a guy like a Jay Crowder, obviously he doesn't have to play the same role as he's been because he doesn't have to be a starter in Milwaukee, but just a role guy that can come in for like 15, 20 minutes and just hit some shots, be physical out there. Obviously, he's kind of a guy that has kind of been known as an irritant, so I don't know. I think that one kind of makes sense. I'm curious as to what they would give up for that one.
Yeah.
But I'd like this one for the Bucks.
Yeah, me too. I'd like to see him on the Bucks because their roster's already beefed up, and adding more would do nothing to hurt them. So I'd like to see that one.
All right, well, that pretty much wraps up today's episode of Off Ball Takes. Again, we appreciate your support. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for listening. Have a good rest of your weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.